Like many people my age, I grew up playing the standard assortment of games that were available at the time, like Sorry, Monopoly, Clue. In particular, Clue was a simple example of a deduction game, where you're trying to solve some sort of puzzle or mystery by gathering information. And while Clue is still popular among the masses, there's a wide variety of more sophisticated games that have a deduction element. Today on Game On Video Reviews, we'll be looking at a deduction game that's exclusively for 2 players. One player takes the role of a cryptozoologist. The other player takes the role of Bigfoot. So here are the components to Bigfoot. In this game, you have one player playing the cryptozoologist who is trying to find out where Bigfoot is. He's going to get the cryptozoologist player card and this deck of cryptozoologist cards. The Bigfoot player will get the Bigfoot player card, also get this pile of footprint tokens, and will get a deck of lair cards. There's also a game round card, which will use one of these footprints to mark the game round card. There's also some reference cards that come with the game as well. Now, the Bigfoot player's card has 2 sides, the awake side and the tired side. And so the Bigfoot will start off awake. And he's going to select 5 of these lair cards. He's actually going to shuffle them up and just draw 5 of these lair cards. And these are going to represent the 5 locations where Bigfoot is hanging out for this game. And it's going to be the cryptozoologist's job to find these 5 locations. So Bigfoot will keep those in his hand, and then the other cards will keep in a deck because those might be accessed later in the game. The cryptozoologist card starts off on the respected side, but if that player makes an incorrect guess when trying to determine a location, it gets moved to the shamed side. And if that player makes an incorrect guess while already shamed, then that's 2 incorrect guesses in a row, and that's going to be a loss for the cryptozoologist, and the Bigfoot player will win the game. So that's one way that Bigfoot can win. At the start of a game round, the cryptozoologist player is going to draw 6 of these cryptozoologist cards. He's going to turn them over and lay them out in front of him into 2 paths, or 2 rows, and he can select however many cards he wants to in each row, which is each row has to have at least 1 card, but it doesn't have to be an even distribution if he doesn't want to. But he's going to make these 2 paths of cards. Let's go ahead and set it up this way. And then the Bigfoot player will select one of these paths of cards to resolve, and then the cryptozoologist will get the other path. So this is called an I split, you choose mechanic. So the Bigfoot player will select one of these paths to resolve, and then the other one will go to the cryptozoologist. So then you'll resolve both of the paths. The cryptozoologist deck has essentially 2 different kinds of cards. There are action cards, which are divided in half. The left side has to do with the cryptozoologist, the right side applies to Bigfoot. And then there are these sensing equipment cards, audio recorders, cameras, and motion detectors, which are the ways that the cryptozoologist is going to get information about where Bigfoot is. So Bigfoot's going to choose who gets which path, and then we'll resolve the cards. Any action cards are going to go to the players that have those particular paths. So that just will leave the motion sensing cards, or the sensing equipment cards. For the cryptozoologist, those cards are just discarded and aren't used. For the Bigfoot player, then, he's going to have to deal with these sensing equipment cards by giving information to the cryptozoologist. So the way this is going to work is, for example, the camera card has one of these terrain symbols on it. And so what the Bigfoot player has to do then is look through his layer cards and is going to find how many instances of that particular terrain type are on these cards. And in this case, this sort of sandy terrain here is in 2 different instances on these 5 cards. Each of the layer cards, as you can see, has 2 terrain types associated with it. So with 2 there, then Bigfoot's going to take 2 of these footprint tokens and place it on the card. And that's going to give some information to the cryptozoologist. The audio recorder is much more straightforward in that it just gives 3 specific locations. And so then Bigfoot will look through and see how many of those locations are on this card. So here we have hut, dam, and beach. And in this case, hut and dam are present in the lair deck, or in the lair hand. And so Bigfoot will put 2 tokens there to represent that. So that's good information for the cryptozoologist. And so that'll be the end of resolving the cards. Oh, also, I mentioned that the Bigfoot character starts off on the awake side. If he turns his card to the tired side, then he can avoid one of these cards, one of the sensing equipment cards. So he could say he's tired and then maybe doesn't have to deal with this audio recorder card, which has a lot of information on it. So he would do that first before he deals with these cards, but that could then be discarded. There are action cards that do various things, one of them being to make, it's like a rest card that will make Bigfoot go from being tired to being awake again. So then the cryptozoologist player can make a guess based upon the information that they have. And he's just going to, he has a reference card here that has all the different locations with all the terrain types on it. He's going to make a guess, and then Bigfoot's going to look through his cards, and if that is a correct guess, then he'll give that card to the cryptozoologist. The cryptozoologist then can choose to discard one of the action cards that he has in his possession to make a second guess. So, because he only has 6 rounds to be able to try to find Bigfoot. And so making 2 guesses, if he's pretty sure on it, can accelerate that process. So like I said though, if he makes an incorrect guess, then that goes from respected to shamed. And if he makes another incorrect guess when he's shamed, then that's the end of the game and Bigfoot wins. So after the guesses are made, then these cards will go in front of the cryptozoologist. He'll be able to keep that information that he's gathered. And then you'll shuffle up, not shuffle up, but you'll take the cryptozoologist deck, deal out 6 more cards, and start another round. So I want to show you a couple of the action cards here. We have the tranquilizer and the prank, which make each player turn their card over from either respected to shamed or awake to tired. We've got the epiphany card, which will allow the cryptozoologist to draw one of the unused lair cards. So that's another deductive element because he can sort of rule out a particular lair. And then we have the decoy here where the Bigfoot player can cancel or discard one of the cryptozoologist's action cards. So it's just sort of a counter when he tries to use an action card. We have perfect placement where you're going to place a path in front of you, in front of the 2 separate paths, and Bigfoot must travel across this card. So you're kind of forcing him to go across one particular card. And on the other side of that, the Bigfoot can use this card to turn the tables, and in the you split, I choose, I split, you choose mechanic basically gets turned on its head, and the Bigfoot player creates the paths, and then the cryptozoologist has to choose which path to take. So the game will be played for a total of 6 rounds. If the cryptozoologist is not able to determine all 5 of those lair cards in 6 rounds, then the game is over and Bigfoot wins. Like I said, if the cryptozoologist is on the shame side and makes an incorrect guess, Bigfoot wins. Otherwise, if the cryptozoologist is able to figure out all 5 of the lair cards, then he wins and the Bigfoot player loses. So that is Bigfoot. There's a wide variety of deduction games on the market right now, from very easy games like Clue up to much more complex games like Fury of Dracula and Sherlock Holmes Consulting Detective. And I think Bigfoot definitely falls into the easier category, but it's still a good, tight little experience. And I think it's the only deduction game that I've seen that uses the I split, you choose mechanic. And I think that is the part of the game that makes it really fascinating. Because essentially you have 2 sides. You have the cryptozoologist, who is the person doing all of the deduction part of things, and you have the Bigfoot character who's trying to hide. So if you equate it to a game like Fury of Dracula, the cryptozoologist is the hunter and Bigfoot is Dracula. And he's just trying to hide and keep from giving too much information to the cryptozoologist player. So by having the cryptozoologist split those cards up and then giving the Bigfoot character the task of trying to decide which path to take, that's really the key decision for the Bigfoot player, is which path is going to give the cryptozoologist the least amount of information and is going to maybe put some cards into my hand that will help me, those cool action cards. So I really like those split action cards that have an ability for Bigfoot and also have an ability for the cryptozoologist. So depending on who gets the card, they'll get to do that thing. So I think it's not a particularly brain-burny, difficult deduction game, because you're gathering information every time that Bigfoot has to place those little foot tokens down. But I will say that the job of the cryptozoologist is definitely the more difficult of the 2. And so if you're playing with new players or with children, I played this game with my 9-year-old daughter, and it's much more difficult to play the cryptozoologist first off, and so you might want to start off having maybe a younger player or a less experienced player play the Bigfoot character first. But the game is so short that you can play with those rolls and then swap and try other rolls and so the reverse rolls and still be done in half an hour with this game playing it twice. So I think it's a really good experience. I think it's a really cool deduction game, and I think it's kind of flown under the radar. I haven't really seen it very much or much talked about. Scott Almes is of course the designer of games like Tiny Epic Galaxies and all the Tiny Epic games, but this is another one that's in his stable of games that I think is really worth a look. So if you're looking for a fun, quick, 2-player deduction game, see if you can pick up a copy of Bigfoot.